Rightio, we're going to have a look at how to set up your acrylic screen in Illustrator. So we're using Adobe Illustrator AI. The first thing you want to do is make a new file. So you're going to go File, File, New, and name it something that makes sense. This is going to be Vivid Screen 1, just because. Now we're going to set a couple of things about our artboard. We're going to make the width. At the moment it's 500 millimeters, which if you change the units to centimeters, you might be able to visualize it more easily. 50 centimeters, far too big. You don't need that. We'll make it 20. This will give you plenty of space to work with, remembering that your box dimensions are either 12 centimeters or 14 centimeters, or somewhere in between. So you can choose a length between 12 and 14 for the base of your box. That's up to you. So 20 centimeters square gives us heaps of space to work in. Please check that your color mode is not CMYK. You want RGB color mode. This is red, green, blue. Illustrator files will speak to the laser when it is in RGB format. So make sure that you are in R, red, green, blue, RGB. Okay. Yay, so now we have our art palette, layers, layer 1. First thing you're going to do is make some layers. Add a second layer. Now we're going to rename layer 1, cut. We're going to name layer 2, raster. What this means is whenever you work in layer 2, raster, you're going to draw in blue. So this is anything that is going to etch or raster into your work. Anything on this layer is going to be cut out of the acrylic, and this will make it far easier for you to navigate. So you should have 2 layers and get into the habit of clicking between the 2 to ensure that you're on the correct layer. First of all, I'm going to work in raster. You have a few options here. You can create the shapes either with the pen tool. So you might want to create some sort of little bubble shape. You'll have to work with the pen tool a little bit to get used to it. I'm going to make some sort of blob here. Ooh. Okay, so I've created my little blob thing using the pen tool. This path I'm going to set to blue. It's saying CMYK blue, but up here we have the RGB spectrum. You can click in here, then double click that line. So select the color, double click the outline, so at the moment we have a blue outline, and we're going to set it to blue 255 R0 G0. So by double clicking here we get to go in and really take control of it. We want blue 255, that's the maximum. Okay, what I now have is a blue, number 255 blue, and I can double check it. I can go over to the left hand side of my screen and double click and check that it's 255. Okay, I can go to the right hand side and double click. 255. Okay, that is going to etch nicely. It's a middle range etch. So I can use the pen tool. I can also use the shapes. So maybe I'll put in a little dot here, holding shift to make it stay. So I put a little dot in, and because I'd already set my colors, guess what? 255, perfect. So those are some shapes that will etch. It's a particularly horrifying little face made with the pen tool and some shapes. Next, you could choose to bring an image in. So I have an image of the seahorse here that I've taken from the internet. I made sure that I got a large size image, and I found one that was made using mostly lines. Drag and drop. And I'll get this enormous version of it because it was made, it was a large size image, so it's got a lot of quality to it. So I'll resize that. Okay. Now, at the moment, this is in pixels, not vector. It's been dropped in, so it's sort of starting to vector out a little bit, but it's a pixel image. Using the image trace button, and you can put some options here, so feel free to play with some of these tracing options, or simply hit image trace. Okay. Let it convert, and this has simply turned it into a vector which I can expand And now it's all grouped, but I can right click, ungroup, and now I can take the sections that I don't need and delete them. So perhaps I don't want those bits, who knows. You can select the whole object and you can remove fill. Now I can turn the outline, double click, 255. That's a raster. And I'm going to group that again. Okay, so now I have a beautiful seahorse that's going to be rastered in. I could have chosen to leave that with a fill. It would simply take a really long time to etch. So the more you have filled in blue, the longer this will take for you to etch. So I'm having a look at it. It's looking good. I'm going to size this down a bit because I know that I'm on a 20 centimeter palette, so this is a fairly big one. There we go. Right, so now I've got my crazy little face thing and my much nicer looking seahorse sitting there. I've used the pen tool, a shape tool, and I've used an image trace on an image from the internet. This is all on my raster level, raster layer. Next up, we need to create a cut layer. If you don't want this raster layer to be edited while you're doing it, click to put a lock in. This means that I can no longer select anything from that layer. I can use this eye to remove it completely. But by locking it, I won't accidentally work on it. So now I'm going to move to the cut layer. To create your box, you must ensure that you have a square, or rather a rectangle at the bottom. This is to sit into the Vivid box to make it all stand up. So ensure that you have a square, and you can resize this shape by clicking Shape, and I'm going to make mine 13 centimeters long by 2 centimeters tall. And I'm just going to position it over my seahorse where I feel is appropriate. That's going to be the stand to hold it up. Unlocking my seahorse, I think I'm just going to make a little seahorse for now. There we go. Lock that layer again, back to cut layer. In order to cut, you must ensure that you are in red. Red will cut, so let's change red to 255, blue to 0. We always just ignore green. There we go, so now I've got my line for cutting in red. There's one more step to do to ensure it cuts on a laser, and that is to change it to a 0.001 line. You'll notice, however, that it's very hard to see when you do this, so I recommend doing this as the final step once you're ready to send it to the laser. You can leave it at 1 so it's visible, but you must change it to 0.001 as soon as you want the laser to read that it needs to be cut out. Next up, we're going to think about the shape that we want. I might say that I want my screen to simply cut out kind of the vague shape of the seahorse. You might choose to cut out a different shape around it and have like a cityscape. It's entirely up to you how you approach your screen, but think in terms of the visuals, think what the light will bounce off, how do you want this to look as you go about creating this screen. So fitting your screen to the shape of your object is one way to do it, or creating a lovely seascape would be beautiful in my case. Perhaps yours would need a forest, or maybe a city scene. Have a think about your own design, what's going to create the most effective form. And I'm going to take this and lock it off there. Okay, now I've got an issue here. If I cut both this shape and this shape, there's going to be a cut straight through here and everything will fall apart. So I need to combine these two shapes. I'm going to invisible the seahorse while I do this. I'll select both objects. Then over on the left hand side you have the Shape Builder tool. Click the Shape Builder tool. It will highlight shapes individually. Click and drag across all the shapes you wish to highlight, then release. Done. We now have a single shape. My seahorse is sitting inside it. I can add a little bit of text to say that this is mine. So I'll say this is Miss Macaulay. It's fine to leave that in black. Black will just etch in much more firmly. Feel free to change the text. I'm going to make it slightly bigger. There we go. It's Miss Macaulay's rad design. Now, if I want to send this to the laser, I must ensure that my outline is 0.001. Okay, I have an outline, 0.001. I have a raster. I have my text here, and if you want to make your life even easier, you might like to make another text layer, because then you can easily go through and tell where everything is. So I'm going to paste that onto the text layer. There we go. And that's my finished product. I will save that. Vivid Screen 1, desktop, save. As an Illustrator file, don't export it as an image, it must be an Illustrator file. And this is what you'll submit on Canvas and we'll send through to the laser for printing. Please rewatch for any section that you need, particularly looking at the image trace. That can be very useful. And at joining shapes. That is another skill that you will need to complete this screen. And have fun experimenting. Make 3, make 4, make as many screens as you want. Remember Illustrator, it's easy to make heaps of different graphics, and we'll pick out your best one, talk with a friend, for the one that we finally print out and use. Enjoy.